recording. There we go. All right. So like I said, I wanted to show you guys a little bit more of your normal sculpting tools on the body. And I did want to show you kind of how we could use masking to do some cool stuff kind of on the edges of the claws here. So really I'm going to focus on kind of doing a little more with the legs, a little more detailing with some regular sculpting brushes, and also just kind of some masking features here. Now, remember, I do have two objects, right? There's the crab body and the crab gear, right? So I have two. So remember, 4 for object mode, right? That's one of your, shortcuts. 4 for object mode. And then I can click on the body itself. Now, remember, if you want to, you could always go up here to turn the eyeball off for the other objects. But there is a feature called Shift I for Isolate Select. And what that does, you see how it kind of isolates just this. The other one's technically still visible, but it's kind of only showing this one. So Shift I turns that feature off and on, right? Whatever object is there, it just kind of isolate selects it. So you might find you like that for hiding stuff, but it's up to you if you want to just kind of use the eyeball up here in the outliner. Remember, outliner is a list of basically all your objects in your scene. In this case, sometimes cameras and lights, and I turn the eyeballs off for those, but also your geometry, right? All right, so now, of course, I've got this object selected. We are in the sculpting workspace, right? And we can hit 5 for our sculpt mode. Actually, she's not here. She's not here today. Thank you. All right, so what we can do is we can actually do sculpting. Some more sculpting on this, right? But remember, 5 is your quick key for sculpt mode, right? That was one of our quick key quizzes also. 5 for sculpt mode. Remember, though, the modes are right up here, right? So if you just kind of left-click on this little menu up here, you'll see object mode, edit mode. Remember, 2 and 3 are also technically edit mode, but they're edge and face edit mode instead of vertex edit mode, which 1 is. But sculpt mode's right there, and coming soon we'll see texture paint, which is 8, right? But 5 is your sculpt mode. Now, in this case also, since we have our UVs overlapping, and we're just going to go full symmetrical to kind of get the most bang for buck out of our textures, right? You don't have to do that necessarily, right? But it's kind of one of those things where if you're trying to maximize what you have, that's a good trick. It does come with sacrificing asymmetry, though. But remember, when you're in sculpt mode, or really even your move, rotate, scale, tweak tools, remember, these options up here will become available. Including this little kind of butterfly icon that has XYZ. And you can turn X on in this case, and that gives us X symmetry. Now, I'm going to go to my blue wrench just so I can see how many polygons I have. Remember also, this little icon right here, kind of the 2 circles, one kind of white and one kind of see-through. If you click on that, you can turn statistics on, and that actually shows you how many polygons you have, right? All right, so in this case, I am just going to actually go back to my crease brush and do a little more detailing kind of in these claw areas here, now that I've got like a million something. So remember, crease brush, right? And I can just kind of zoom in here. And we can easily do more detailing with this, right? So I can easily just kind of put a little more in there. Now you see how now my camera rotate is around where I just sculpted? Remember, that is this preference. Edit preferences, navigation, orbit around selection. So not only does that actually automatically set your camera rotate around your regular selections when you're doing normal modeling, it actually works for painting and sculpting too. So wherever you last painted or sculpted, it'll orbit around that. All right, so I'll just go in here and sculpt a little bit. And so with more polygons, we can get the detail to show up more, right? And so this could be a great way. Of course, right bracket will make your brush bigger. Left bracket will make it smaller. And so I could easily just kind of get bigger creases if I want in the areas. And of course, we can do creases lengthwise this way. Kind of develop a little more kind of detailing there. If you need to, hold down Shift to smooth to kind of soften areas out a little bit. And of course, I can go back to the other side, and we'll kind of do something similar here. So of course, we can come in here and use our crease. And that orbit selection you see is very, very useful and very cool. It really allows you to kind of come in there and just start to sculpt in an area that you want to. Right? I can make this brush just a little smaller. Remember, right and left brackets right? The right and left bracket are next to P, right? So if you go to see where P's on your keyboard, you'll see that there's kind of what look like parentheses, but kind of bracket, like square ones, and ones that kind of look like they've got a little line, like they're kind of right next to enter, right below plus and minus and backspace. It's kind of all right up there. But right and left bracket, right? Of course, radius is up here. You can always right-click and get some of the controls there also. And S will kind of do it as well, right? I've always liked the right and left bracket keys a little more. So we just go in here and crease these a little bit, right? And I can add a little more creasing up here. And you see how that orbit selection is super, super cool? Because wherever I last sculpted, it's automatic so my camera rotate around that. So it's not something I really have to worry about as much. So I absolutely recommend that orbit selection preference to be on. It's very cool. And of course, if I really wanted to, I could get in here and you could actually get quite creative with crease, right? So if I make my brush size even smaller here, I can come in here and I could really start to kind of do like nodules, right? So I can just get in here and do a crease there, and then kind of build another crease out here. And so you can start to kind of create some nodule forms just with the crease brush also. So don't feel like it's just for wrinkles, right? Or fat, muscle folds and fat folds. Of course, it's great at doing that, and you can even use it for some clothing folds, although Blender does actually have a reasonably cool cloth sculpting brush. But since we don't have cloth on this guy, probably not going to worry about it too much, right? But you see how crease can actually do some pretty neat things like that if you just get creative with it, right? So you can go do little nodules here if you want to. So really get creative with your brushes, right? You would probably have to be in the millions of polygons to get this detail to show up better. Do what you can with your device, right? It does depend on how powerful your computer is, how much it can sculpt. But you see how crease in itself can be used for some really, really cool stuff also. So I can just get in here and kind of do some neat little creasing here. And this can be a great way to add some neat and interesting little details to your model, right? So don't be afraid to go in here and use some of these other things like crease. If you wanted to, there's actually some neat brushes like Blob Brush, right? And what Blob Brush does is it's kind of an interesting inflate brush. So when you click on it, it kind of does like this inflate feature, right? So you can kind of go in here and enhance those globs a little bit more, right? Believe it or not, that Blob Brush is somewhat distinct from regular draw, right? Let's see, draw's got drag dot still on, so I'll set my drag dot to space, right? I'll set the hardness back to 0. Let's see, and my spacing for my stroke on draw is still high, so we'll go back to 10%, right? So sometimes you need to go back in there and turn some of those features down. But you see how regular draw is somewhat similar to Blob, but it's not exactly identical. Blob has kind of got like this kind of slight inflate to it that it kind of pulls out the stuff around it also, right? So kind of neat. But explore some of these different brushes, right? You might find you can do some neat stuff with them. Give kind of these little kind of pustules here. Now, one of the things I want to show you guys also was the masking feature, right? The masking feature. Now, you'll see over here on the left side we have all these sculpting brushes, right? All of these sculpting brushes. Now, you'll notice there's also a little scroll bar here, right? So there's a little scroll bar here. Scroll wheel will also scroll through those. So obviously we don't really like to use scroll wheel that much in Blender if we can. Like for zooming, we use Alt right mouse button. But when you have a slider, right, don't be afraid to just move your cursor over the actual sculpt brushes and use the slider to go down, right? And you see if we scroll down enough past the yellow brushes, you'll see there's a brush that's kind of like a brush icon with what looks like a kind of darker gray and then a lighter white, right? If you have your cursor over that tool, it'll say mask, right? Mask. If I click on that, you see the icon's kind of white for it, or kind of like a light gray. What I can do now is I can go in here and paint the mask. Now, the strength is set to 500 or 50% right now, so you can always set the strength to 100, which I like to usually have. You can make your brush size a little smaller, right or left bracket key, or S if you'd rather use S. And you see what I could do is I could left click drag to paint in here, right? And what this will do is this will allow me to kind of start to paint in masking for this. So you see what it's doing is it's kind of painting a dark, dark gray. That is a mask feature, right? What the masking means is that wherever you paint, and you could actually use like things like your rectangle box mask. I'll show you that kind of a little bit on the back claw just to show you how you can get maybe a quicker start for this. But masking basically means that wherever you paint this dark gray, you can't sculpt. Right? That's what's cool about masking is it's kind of masking off the area so you can't do anything to it. You can hold down Shift to smooth it. So if you want to soften some areas, Shift will work for smoothing that as well. And you see how I can kind of get in here and really kind of create this like faded, kind of cool faded effect here. Where it's kind of pushing up. It's kind of got this little kind of claw effect to it. So Shift will soften or smooth the mask. Now, if I go back to, say, my draw brush, right, you'll notice when I sculpt, you see how it won't actually affect the mask area? So you see when I'm sculpting, the masked area, I can't sculpt on, right? So that's one of the neat things you can do with it. You can mask off an area to not be sculptable, right? That's what the mask does. Here's the thing, though. You'll see that there is a mask menu up here, right? There's a mask menu up here. In that mask menu, you'll see that you can clear the mask, Control-I, or Control-A, sorry. But there's also invert mask, right? So when you're in sculpt mode, there is a mask menu. And you can invert mask. So now, the rest of the model's masked. And now when I sculpt, it'll just sculpt that area. So you can paint a mask, because in this case, you notice how kind of it was easier to paint a mask just for the small area that I didn't want to sculpt with, or I wanted to sculpt with, and then invert it. So oftentimes it's better to just kind of mask the area you actually want to work with, particularly if it's a smaller area, and invert the mask. So there is a mask menu up here. You can invert mask, you can clear mask. Now, with that mask setup, though, if I scroll back down, far towards the bottom, oh man, it disconnected. That's lovely. All right, let me see if I can reconnect that for you. Come on. Great, okay. All right, well, I'm going to, come on, reconnect. Stupid TV. Come on, do this. All right, it's not connecting. I'm going to do the inflate feature here and then stop recording the video. But there is a mesh filter brush way down. It's kind of like a ball with a squared, kind of like what looks like a blue squigglies coming out of it. You can click on that mesh filter, and there is kind of at the very top options. And by default, it's set to inflate usually, but there's other options there. And what you can do is you can just left click and it kind of inflates that out. And that could be a neat way to kind of add some cool extra details to your model. All right, with that I'm going to stop because that connect issue is probably going to be an issue for a little while. All right.